What is the most memorable moment you shared with a stranger who you never saw again? I had about a 2-hour drive from Columbus to the Cleveland area. I tend to drive on the faster side and therefore pass a lot of people. I noticed about 20 minutes into the drive that the car behind me was still the same one that got onto the highway right behind me. We ended up driving the entire 2 hours right next to each other or in front of behind each other. We created space in lanes to help the other pass the slower cars and made sure the other wouldn't fall behind. As I was getting off the highway, he honked his horn, gave me a big smile, and waved. It has been my favorite driving experience so far. Nick Bar. I was on a first date and there was an old guy at the bar. I looked like an old fisherman from a novel, and he was convinced my date and I were already married. He went on and on about it. We said we weren't married and he told us we were meant to be together and would be married a long time. He talked with us for a good 15 minutes about this. My date and I did get married about a year later and have been together almost 25 years now. The day my dad died I was holding it together pretty well. Late that night I went to Target to have a moment to just zone out and buy a few groceries. As I got to the check stand with my arm full of stuff I dropped a container of sour cream and it exploded everywhere. I completely lost control of myself and started to cry. The ugly cry. I was instantly surrounded by a group of women who just took charge of the whole situation. They helped me get everything paid for, cleaned up, and one lady even got a new sour cream. No words were spoken, but their compassion and take charge attitude has stayed with me since. I found a rock formation that looked like a D and balls in a cave in Vietnam. I laughed and pointed at it. Some Chinese tourists started doing the same thing and then some Russian tourists followed suit. Great bonding because no matter what, phallic shaped objects are funny. When I was at Disneyland a few years ago, a woman approached me out of the blue in the middle of Main Street and asked if I'd like to dance. I obliged her, and we spent the next few minutes chatting while her friends filmed us dancing. It turns out it was her birthday and she was traversing the park on a birthday scavenger hunt. And one of the items on the list was to dance with a stranger. I wished her a happy birthday. We said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. I never even got her name, but it still makes me smile when I think about it. I was about 10 years old and I had a pair of Heelys and they were the coolest ducking thing on the earth. I would roll all over on those things and thought I was hot it. We were in China, spending a few weeks in Beijing. I was rolling around in Tiananmen Square, hit a crack and lost one of the wheels. I looked around for about an hour, but to no avail. I was probably visibly bummed, as my Heelys, the things that made me hot it, were now ineffective and basically ruined. The next morning, I was walking through the square on the way to meet my friends, and an older gentleman ran up to me and stopped me. He had found my wheel. He said that he had seen me rolling around and saw me looking for the wheel after I fell. He saw that I gave up and stuck around for another hour to keep looking after I left. He came there the next morning with no expectation that I'd pass through, but wanted to be there just in case. I'm not sure who was happier, me that I got my wheel back or him because he didn't think he'd see me in literally the world's busiest square. I said thank you and that was about it. We both had places to be and that was that. Same first name, same birthday, same interests and same work field. Saw them at a network creation event and never seen again. I'm pretty sure I told this before, but I enjoy it, so here it goes. I was playing on my Nintendo DS in the subway when I caught a random connection. I looked up to see if I could spot the other person with the DS, and wound up locking eyes with this incredibly intense little boy who was seated a few benches away from me. "Do you have Pokemon?" he asked, and as it turned out, I did in fact have Pokemon. With that, our fate was sealed. There's this thing in the Pokemon games where, if you meet the gaze of another trainer on your journey, then you must do battle. I had just experienced this in real life. He destroyed me, all level 100s. Felt like I was an extra in the damn anime doing battle with the protagonist. I was leaving the gym and walked down a long hallway, and didn't remember having any money on me. As soon as I stepped outside, I heard a coin drop, and looked down and $2 seemed to have fallen from somewhere on me. It was strange because I didn't have any money on me, and it would have fallen off of me inside while walking. I thought, it rolls and I pick it up. I was confused because I don't know where the $2 came from. I look up and there's a homeless man in a wheelchair playing harmonica who I otherwise would have passed by. I gave the $2 to him. He said thank you. I said no problem. I began to walk away and he said good. You? I played along and said, oh, good. Where did you learn to play harmonica? He proceeded to tell me that he used to play all sorts of instruments until he had his stroke, and showed me that one of his arms didn't work anymore. He was a nice guy, and it made my day a bit better. It was a nice and humbling moment. I met a well-dressed older gentleman at a train station in London. He struck up a conversation about the departures board, and being a 20-year-old woman I was hesitant to talk back. But I like chatting to people and decided to keep the convo going. He ended up being extremely easy to talk to. I ended up telling him I was waiting for a train to take me to the airport so I could see my boyfriend in Hong Kong whom I hadn't seen for months. And he ended up telling me all about his life and his amazing family, and just be all round charming. He was in London for the day to pick up a passport so he could whisk his wife away on holiday, and he just made me smile the way he was so smitten with her. He ended up leaving after about half an hour, and when he left he took my hand and kissed it, telling me it's so beautiful to see a young woman in love. I never caught his name, but I'll always remember him. I was 13 and waiting for a taxi. It was raining and I had no umbrella, so I got soaked. This guy next to me sheltered me from the rain with his umbrella. We talked while waiting for the taxi and he was so easy and fun to talk to. Note, I was a shy kid with few friends so this was a unique event. After about 15 minutes another guy came up on his scooter. My guy told him that I was a friend of his and if he could drop me to my destination. So yeah, I just climbed on this stranger's scooter and took the lift home. Perhaps that was dumb looking back on it. Anyway, I still think of this guy and the kindness he showed me to this day even though I don't even know his name or remember his face. I was on an eastbound train from Colorado 2 days before Christmas. There was some kind of incident in another car around 11 o'clock that night. A dude got wasted and started threatening other passengers, and we had to make a stop so that the local police could come and collect him. After the delay, the conductor came over the speakers and announced that if anyone was feeling upset or shaken by the incident, one of the passengers had offered to play his guitar in the snack car and anyone who was awake was welcome to come down and join in for a sing-along. I'm always down for weird train activities so I decided to grab my harmonica from my bag and head down. There were about 15 of us in the car, ranging in age from 16 to mid-70s and from all over the country. We sang every song we could think of that even kind of referenced a train. We were somewhere in rural Nebraska at that point and nobody had cell service to look up lyrics. So at times I was pretty sure that we were making up more of the words than we actually remembered. The conductor came through after a while and offered to play a few songs. So the guy with the guitar handed it off and pulled out a mandolin. And my harmonica got passed around the group while one guy drummed along on his backpack. After a while the conductor got up and left, then came back with a copy of the Polar Express. He read it out loud to our absolutely captivated group of mostly adult travelers while the snow flew all around us in the night. And I swear that for a few minutes our trip felt every bit as magical as the visits to Santa Claus in the story. Sometime well after the snack car was supposed to have been vacated for the night, we capped things off with the most ridiculously earnest rendition of Don't Stop Believing that has ever been performed and went our separate ways. I never saw anyone from our little makeshift band again, but I'll always remember that weird, wonderful late night celebration of Journey and the magic of winter travel that came about because some guy was a jackass on a train. I was on a long late night bus ride. It was express so it made very few stops. The bus had maybe 10 people on it in total. Halfway through the trip it made a stop at a small town station so people could grab a snack or use a public restroom and maybe stretch their legs. I went up to the counter to buy what at that point was my dinner even though it was after 10 PM, and when the cashier rang it up I passed a $50 bill to her and she told me that she couldn't make change. Defeated, I went back to my seat on the bus. As everyone piled on and the bus drove away, a lovely middle-aged lady walked up from her seat near the back and politely asked if I minded if she sat with me. I told her she was more than welcome. She sits and proceeds to unpack a small lunch bag. She then split the entirety of her meal with me. She said she had been waiting for the washroom to clear out and had overheard what happened. She said, "I've gone hungry in my life and it sucks. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So you can share with me." When we were done, I jokingly asked if she could break a $50 and we had a good laugh. She stuck with me for the remainder of the trip and was a very interesting lady besides being incredibly generous. I hope she is well. I was in an ice cream store with a few friends, and I made eye contact with some random guy walking to the counter. For some reason, neither of us broke eye contact, and for those few seconds he made an incredibly goofy face, to which I responded with another goofy face. For the rest of the time we were in there, him and I didn't even look at each other again. Edit. After the interaction, we didn't look at each other and make eye contact again. I did look at him a few times while he was waiting and his back was turned and it's possible he looked at me. I should have phrased that better. Got on the Metro North headed out of Nick to visit family for Thanksgiving. A woman in her 70s got on the same stop as me and sat directly across from me. She had a newborn strapped to her chest and was singing in Spanish. After riding the train for about 20 minutes she signals for my attention and I take my headphones out. I being towards her and she gestures to the baby and says, "You take." So I held her infant, grandchild I presume, while she got herself organized to feed and change the baby. After she was done she gestured for me to help her strap the baby back on. She waved goodbye when she got off the train and that was that. It's weird to know there is some random newborn that I've held and will never know. So about 11 years ago I visited India. I went to a Sikh temple and sat down to enjoy langar, free food served by Sikhs to anyone who walks in. I was served food by this volunteer and we started chatting after lunch and became buddies. So fast forward, I am visiting another Sikh temple in the Himalayas and in the kitchen there was only one volunteer when a large bus filled with people pulled in. I went up to the guy and asked if he needed help and he gladly accepted it. So I start serving food to people sitting in the lines and guess who I see sitting down? My buddy from the first Sikh temple. It was great seeing him and we said our hellos. It was the night before Christmas Eve, about 8:30 p.m. My mom was trying to sell our place. We'd moved a few blocks away and with my new stepdad. The driveway needed to be clear and there was about 1.5 feet of snow to shovel. I was still pretty young and it was going to be a big job. I trudged over there with my shovel and just started the first row when a random guy in a snowplow turned in and cleared the whole driveway in 2 minutes easy. He was wearing the red plaid jacket and toque combo, classic Canadian look. I was worried as we hadn't hired a snow removal guy, but he just waved and said Merry Christmas and drove off. Thanks snowplow guy, you taught me a thing or two about Christmas spirit. While out for a long walk to take some photos in Wellington, New Zealand, I stopped to drink some water and get chatting with a guy sitting on the park bench. He was homeless in that he didn't have a permanent residence, but he considered himself more of a nomad, touring around the country, and had made his way from the UK to New Zealand over the course of a few years. He went on about how he used to work in London, got sick of his corporate job, and went traveling with the remainder of his savings. Never looking back, he's eventually burnt his savings, and was now happily stranded in New Zealand. I still remember his initials were DG, and he asked if I wanted to take a photo of him. I'd taken hundreds of photos of landscapes, animals, and people, but his one was my favorite from the day. I was in the US Navy at the time and we pulled into port in Norway. We had a couple days to explore and I went to the closest city, Bergen. While in the main square area of town just down the road from their fish market there was a small boy, maybe 3 years old, and his father. The boy had a large red balloon but it was windy and it got away from him. His father made a grab for it and missed but obviously couldn't run after it and leave his kid. It was blowing generally in my direction and I made a quick dash for it and managed to catch it out of the air before it blew away. I then crouched down and held it out for the boy. He looked like he was about to start crying but immediately brightened up with the kind happiness only a child can have. He took the balloon and his father just gave me a small smile and a nod. I returned the smile and nod and we went on our way. This moment always sticks out to me. Edit. Thanks for the gold friend. A stranger gave me $300. No strings attached. I met him and his wife in Oklahoma City while on a road trip across country alone. I was seated near them at a restaurant bar. Didn't ask for any money and don't even know his name, but he rules. On a night out, I was feeling pretty rough, so I was sat down on some steps eating a box of hot chips. This group of girls walked past. One of them in a yellow with black polka dot dress and a flower halo broke off and sat next to me. She had a thick Irish accent. "What's your name?" "Jolly." "You?" "Annette." "Ask me where I live." "Dart alright. Where do you live?" She grabbed one of my chips, put it in her mouth and said in the ducking moment, kissed my forehead and ran off to join her group again. Still think about her. Was on the bus home and this girl sitting next to me was making paper cranes. Before I got off the bus she stopped me and gave me the crane she was working on and smiled at me. I still have it and I think about it a lot. Edit. Oh gosh, I didn't expect everyone to be waiting on me to open up the crane to see if there's a number inside. I carefully unfolded it and I didn't see a number, unfortunately. Wilder made for a cute story though. Back in the late 90s we drove a dark blue 84 Volvo wagon. Hardly ever saw another car like it. One day at a grocery store we see another couple in the exact same car. I rolled down the window and raised my fist in the air. The other driver saw and raised his fist. Solidarity. Years ago, I was at the bus stop super early one morning. It was really cold as well. Anyway, there was a guy that I used to see every time I would get the 7 AM bus. Looked like a builder. He always got off near one of the large building sites by the university. We were on nodding terms. One morning, there was a fireball disintegrating meteor. We both saw it. He turned to me and said with a super serious face, "You know our souls are forever linked now." We went back to nodding terms. And I never saw him after I quit early morning classes. I guess because I remember it. He was kinda right and Ducker is still trolling me. I've told this story before, but people like it so I will share again. When I was a kid we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away and I went back to my piles able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was over 20 years or so ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. Back when I rode the bus everywhere, I was at the bus stop outside the mall and this guy comes up and goes, "Will you hold my puppy while I run inside and find my wife?" And he produced this little white puppy. So I held it while he went inside. Puppy was so soft. Guy came back with his wife. Took the puppy. I got on the bus and that was that. I've shared this on Reddit before. The day I found out my grandmother had a stroke and would never walk or talk again. I was away at college. I finally broke down in a bathroom. A girl came in and asked if I needed a hug. I was crying so hard that I really didn't get a look at her face. I cried on her shoulder for about 10 minutes and then had to pull myself together and leave for class. I never explained myself and she never asked. I never recognized or spoke to her again. I wonder if she sometimes saw me on campus and wondered what was up and if I was okay. I was at this event in a nearby provincial park that offered a shuttle service in and out of the park. They got more interest than bargained for I guess and people ended up having to wait about 2 hours for a ride out of the park. This made some people very angry at these poor rangers who were obviously just kids in their summer jobs. This big dude was just screaming at this young looking girl, just going at her about doing something productive. Poor girl was in tears just apologizing over and over again and trying to get to her co-workers but he wasn't letting her pass. This pissed me the duck off, so I yelled, "What the duck is she supposed to do?" And this older lady a few people down joined in with me to pretty much shame the dude back to his family. Of course, when the buses finally came, he sat his fat ass down on one of the priority seats despite there being a woman with a walker almost falling down right beside him. Old lady from before swoops in and manages to kick him off and sat the woman down. Badass lady, I miss you. I'll share the Cliff Notes version since it sounds so unreal. Years ago I walked to a bridge with intention, killing myself by jumping off. Met a guy there who wouldn't stop hovering around me. Eventually he approaches me and tells me that I have bad spirits around me and that I should keep my head up and not give in to them. ETHRN asks if he can smudge me. I didn't know what that was but agreed anyway. He pulls out sage, a lighter and a shell from his backpack and proceeds to bless me right there. As soon as he finishes, a bunch of birds, seagulls, crows and pigeons all come flying over and fly in circles above us. He said that they were telling me my life was about to turn around, and then he said goodbye and left. My life did change that day. Big time. And when my mind occasionally creeps back to dark places, I think of him and it pulls me back. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all the really sweet replies. I wasn't expecting this story to be received so well. I've always been reluctant to share it outside of the handful of IRL friends that I have because I would probably think it sounded like bullet if someone told me it to me. Glad I took the chance. And thank you for the gold, kind stranger. I'll be sure to pay it forward. I was at a play barn and shot a foam tennis ball out of a compressed air cannon directly into the barrel of the cannon on the opposite side. About 60 feet away, the kid operating the cannon was amazed and shot the ball directly back at me, hitting me in the head. We both looked at each other like WTF. When I was studying abroad in Lithuania, I volunteered at a soup kitchen, and every now and again there would be an older lady helping out who dropped off supplies. We would smile at each other and say hello even through the language barrier. Well, one night I went to Easter Mass in the town I was volunteering in, and it was warmer during the day, so I didn't think about bringing a heavier jacket once it got dark. Not to mention the church was this old massive building. So I'm sitting through mass and I'm getting colder and start shivering pretty noticeably, when all of a sudden I feel someone drape a scarf over my shoulders. I turn around and it's the lady who would drop off supplies at the soup kitchen. Once mass was over, I tried to return the scarf, but she refused to take it back. I did my best to extend my gratitude through the language barrier, but I'm sure she knew. It was the most beautiful and kindest thing that has ever happened to me. That was the last time I saw her, and I will never forget her kindness towards me. It still tears me up thinking about it. Went to a cafe. Small place, but popular. I got a coffee and looked around for seats. None. I then notice an elderly lady sitting by a table. I ask if I can sit down with her. She gladly says yes. We chat a bit and it was also lovely. After a while she had to leave though. Never catched her name or anything. When I was 14, I was trapped in the rubble of an earthquake. I spent 6 hours crawling towards a man whose face I never had the opportunity to see. He was a citizen who didn't leave his name with anyone and never came forward. After the fact, it has always bothered me that I will likely never find out who he was or tell him how much comfort his voice gave me during those horrible hours. When I saw pictures of the space I ended up in, much later, I couldn't, and can't, understand how he was able to stand where he stood for 6 hours without injuring himself or suffering some sort of emotional trauma himself. He's my hero. I was out at a beach with my family for a bonfire. Only problem was that we got there too late and there were no more open pits. We sat about on the sand for about an hour until a man came up to us telling us that he had ran out of logs. Seeing as we had no pit and that they were freezing without a fire, we took him up on his offer and joined his family around their pit. We sat until midnight talking about music from the 70s and talking about our lives. Coolest bunch of people I've met in a while. I wrestled in high school, and after a match, tradition dictates that you walk over and shake the hand of your opponent's coach. Then cross the mat diagonally and shake your own coach hand, crossing paths with your former opponent as you do so. Once after a match with a kid I'd never met before, I said round the world as we approached each other, and we high-fived as we crossed paths and then did the round the world high-five thing and high-fived down low behind our backs. It was one of my proudest moments. I was in Legazpi, Philippines. and Avengers just came out, summer 2012, and I went to go watch it at the local theater in town. The ship just left the city, and I was relieved of duty, as now it was vacation time for me after months at sea sailing from Perth, or to Legazpi, Pi via the treacherous Makassar Straits. So Avengers it is? Hahaha. After the movie, it got dark out, and I wandered around town and got lost. I was trying to find a way back to the hotel, but Legazpi was a bit difficult to navigate by foot. This guy in his motorcycle sidecar taxi tuk-tuk zooms up to me and asks if I'm lost. I say I'm okay, that I don't need a taxi, but he insisted I enter his tuk-tuk, that he'd take me to the town festival that was going on for free. I obliged, and he sped off with me inside. He goes, "My friend, you were about to get mugged by those dozen squatters. He may have been fishing for a fare, or maybe he wasn't. To me though, his face and demeanor genuinely came off as a hard-working super nice guy. If he didn't, well, then I applaud him for being an amazing actor and he's in the wrong line of work." We chilled at the festival and got to know each other over a couple of beers. On me. Afterwards, he took me down this dark path, and I got a bit apprehensive. He kept saying, "Don't worry, I'm taking you to my house for dinner." And yes, he took me to his tiny friggin' shack of a house near the ocean for dinner. His wife was cooking, and he had 2 tiny kids running around happy their daddy is back home. We ate a great meal, and he dropped me off back at the hotel. No charge. What the hell? Take my $20. Nope. Okay fine. How about $40? And you show me the Mayan volcano and all the cool stuff around here tomorrow? He accepted. Next morning comes around. He shows up at my hotel. We take off and he takes me to these Dutch church ruins that got decimated by a volcanic eruption in the 1600s or 1700s. Hiked all around these awesome caves, and strolled around the black sand beaches. We had a hell of a time. I give him $60, hid another $20 behind another $20 lol, as the bills were crisp enough that you can kind of make it seem like one bill. He discovered this as I was walking away and I laughed at him and waved back. He had no choice but to keep it. I wished him and his family well. He was a good person. We kept in touch via email, except he didn't have his own computer, nor did he have his own email address. He wasn't tech savvy. He'd use his friends' email addresses to email me about his kids and stuff over the next few weeks. In 2013, Typhoon Yolanda devastates the Philippines. I emailed all his friends in vain. I've never heard from him again. Edit. You Philippine real estate PM'd me and we went back and forth over a couple details. With that info, he was able to track down his now grown son. And the man himself made a Reddit account and just messaged me. Oh, we're catching up as we speak. Thank you Philippine real estate. Edit 2. I'm not sure if anyone else sees this, but we've been going back and forth for a while. He's been down and out right now. His tricycle finally broke. Also, does anyone know how to send money to PH, let alone Legazpi? Ugh. Edit 3. We still chat quite often now. His daughter about to graduate high school. His youngest studying very hard. And I was able to help him get a new trick engine, because his old one broke down. D. Again. Thanks to all that helped me track him down and helped me how to send money over there. D. My son was in a pretty serious accident. I was a wreck in the IQ waiting room. A little girl maybe about 9 or 10 years old was with her family, saying goodbye to her great grandmother. She waltzed right up to me and said, "Sir, why are you crying?" Double quote. I explained my son was very sick. She handed me a miniature puppy doll and told me it was lucky and my son would get better. She was right. He did and I still keep that little puppy on my dresser and think of that sweet child. As a teenager, I caught a bus into town. An old chap took the one free seat next to me and somehow we started chatting. He started telling me how he took part in a battle during World War II where he was one of only a handful of survivors. It was fascinating listening to him, especially being an army brat myself. I wish I could have spent longer on the bus with him and remembered more of the conversation, but it's lived with me now for 35 years. My touch football team was sponsored by a local bar that does karaoke on the same day of the week that our games are. We went for a beer after our game, I don't sing well, but I enjoy singing and I'm not shy. I sing the occasional song, but I would say one every 4 times we go. Wasn't planning on singing this time, but a girl went upstage and asked if anyone would sing that song from Greasy or the one that I want. I thought, why the hell not? Went up and we ducking nailed it. People were dancing and cheering. We finished the song. We both sort of said good job like stuff. She went back to her table of friends. I went back to my football team. She and her friends left shortly afterward. That was over 20 years ago. I still think about that night from time to time.